The year 2463 tasted like recycled air, filtered starlight, and overpriced synthale. Avery Cole swirled the amber liquid in his glass, watching the slow, majestic rotation of Earth below. From his seat in the Empyrean, the most pretentious restaurant on the Saffron Ring, the planet was a perfect cerulean marble, swirled with clouds of brilliant white. It was a view that cost more than a month's rent in the lower sectors. A view meant to inspire awe, to remind you of humanity's grand cosmic destiny. For Avery, it was just a reminder of how far he had run, and how the thing he was running from was always right there, hanging in the void. The Saffron Ring was a city of impossible architecture, a golden circlet of commerce and culture hanging in geosynchronous orbit. It was the great crossroads of the known galaxy, where lumbering Draxel mechanics, in their hulking gas-powered exoskeletons, haggled with Orinth mystics, who communicated in resonating hums and shimmering light patterns. Ships from a dozen federations docked here, their crews spilling into the promenades, bringing with them the scent of exotic spices, scorched metal, and alien philosophies. The air itself was a polyglot symphony of human languages, the clicks and whistles of insectoid traders, and the low, vibrational speech of silicon lifeforms. Interstellar law was a tangled mess, but the one thing that held it all together was the concept of the Oath Bond, a sacred, biologically binding agreement that was more potent than any treaty. To break one was to invite ruin not just upon yourself, but upon your entire civilization. Avery knew this, just as he knew that most bonds were signed for profit, not principle. His own principles were simpler. 1. Do the job you are paid for. 2. Never trust your employer. 3. Do not get attached. These rules had served him well since he had traded his life as a black ops agent for the sterile, predictable world of security architecture. He designed impenetrable systems for corporations that had secrets to keep, and he was the best. It was a quiet life, a solitary one. He had built walls around himself more formidable than any firewall he had ever coded, which made this blind date all the more absurd. His friend Rafe, a freelance investigator with a misplaced sense of optimism, had insisted, "You need to get out, Avery. Design something other than your own tomb." So here he was, wearing an actual collared shirt, sitting at a table for two that remained stubbornly empty. His date was 45 minutes late. That was not fashionably late. That was a clear statement of intent. Or, more likely, a lack of it. Avery sighed. The sound lost in the restaurant's soft, ambient music. The Empyrean was a marvel of engineering, a perfect circle of transparent plasteel that offered an unbroken panorama of space. Diners sat in floating magnetic chairs, their tables hovering over a floor that seemed to melt into the star-dusted abyss. He watched a transport shuttle, a silver needle trailing blue ion fire, glide silently toward the ring's docking bay. He should just go, pay for his drink and walk away. He had given it a fair shot, fulfilled his promise to Rafe. He was reaching for the payment chip embedded in his cuff when a small voice cut through his thoughts. "Excuse me." He looked down. Standing beside his table was a child, an Orinth child, no older than 6 terrestrial years. Her hair was the color of spun moonlight, a cascade of silver strands that seemed to capture and refract the ambient light with an optical shimmer. Her skin was a pale lavender, and her eyes were the most startling shade of purple he had ever seen, glowing with a soft, internal luminescence. She was dressed in a simple, flowing tunic of deep indigo, and in her small hands she clutched a thin, rectangular object that pulsed with a faint white light. Avery raised an eyebrow. "Can I help you?" The little girl looked up at him, her large, luminous eyes holding a gravity that seemed far too old for her face. "Are you Avery Cole?" she asked, her voice a soft, melodic chime. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, his old instincts kicking in. Giving your name to a stranger, even a child, was a data point. But the absurdity of the situation disarmed him. "I am," he admitted. She offered a small, solemn bow, a gesture of profound respect that looked both practiced and out of place on someone so young. "My mommy's sorry she's late." Avery blinked. He glanced around the restaurant, expecting to see a woman waving, perhaps laughing at the misunderstanding. He saw nothing but bored socialites and a few Draxel merchants closing a deal over a platter of iridescent space kelp. He looked back at the child. This had to be a joke, a very strange, very elaborate prank orchestrated by Rafe. "Your mommy," he said slowly, testing the words. "She is my date." The girl nodded, her silver hair rippling. She was delayed by a matter of state. "She sent me ahead with this." She held out the object in her hands. It was a biocard, wafer-thin and crafted from a material that resembled polished bone. As she extended it, the white light pulsed, and an insignia bloomed on its surface, a complex, spiraling crest that Avery recognized with a jolt. It was the royal seal of the Orinth High Command, a symbol of immense power and authority. He felt a cold knot form in his stomach. This was not Rafe's idea of a joke. This was something else entirely. He reached out and took the card. The moment his fingers brushed its surface, it warmed to his touch, and the seal flared, shifting from white to a deep, royal purple. Information scrolled across its surface in the elegant, flowing script of the Orinth. Too fast for him to read, but the intent was clear. This was an authentic, high-level diplomatic credential. "My name is Nia," the little girl said, as if it were an afterthought. "Avery," he replied, his mind racing. A blind date with a high-ranking Orinth official, someone from the royal bloodline. Why? What could she possibly want with a retired operative turned security consultant? It made no sense. He felt a familiar prickle on the back of his neck, the feeling of a carefully laid trap about to spring. He was about to ask another question, to probe this bizarre situation, when the world dissolved into a concussive roar. The entire plasteel wall to his left did not just crack. It exploded inward in a shower of crystalline shrapnel. The atmospheric shield outside, designed to stop micrometeoroids and space debris, shimmered violently and then collapsed with a deafening hiss, sucking the air from the room in a furious, shrieking gale. Pandemonium erupted, screams mixed with the crash of shattering glass and the shriek of failing systems. Emergency klaxons blared, casting the chaotic scene in strobes of crimson light. Avery did not think. He reacted. Years of training took over, his body moving with a fluid, brutal efficiency he had not called upon in a decade. His first instinct was Nia. He lunged, grabbing the girl and pulling her down behind the magnetic table, his body instinctively curving around hers to shield her from the debris. A piece of shrapnel the size of his fist whizzed past where her head had been, embedding itself in the chair opposite them, with a sickening thud. Another sound cut through the chaos, sharper and more precise than the explosion, the high-energy crack of a plasma rifle. A bolt of incandescent green energy seared through the air, vaporizing a decorative fountain and splashing molten metal across the floor. Sniper. Outside. The shot had come from the void. He scanned the room in a fraction of a second, his mind a cold, calculating machine. Exits. Cover. Threats. The main doors were a bottleneck of screaming patrons. The service corridors were a possibility, but he did not know the layout. Then he saw a small, reinforced hatch in the floor, an emergency escape pod access point, 10 meters away. "Stay with me," he yelled to Nia over the din. The girl was terrified, but she was not screaming. Her luminous purple eyes were wide with shock, but she clung to him, her small body trembling. Another plasma bolt hit the ceiling, showering them with sparks and burning insulation. They were pinned down. He needed a distraction, something to break the sniper's line of sight. He ripped the heavy metallic serving tray from its magnetic lock on the tabletop. It was a poor shield, but it was better than nothing. "On my mark, we run for that hatch." "Do you understand?" he commanded. Nia nodded, her silver hair clinging to her face from the sudden wind. He took a deep breath. He could see the attacker now, a single figure in a black, form-fitting void suit, using a propulsion pack to hover just outside the gaping hole in the restaurant wall. The sniper was methodical, taking aim, preparing for another shot. Avery made his move. He kicked the base of the table, sending it flipping upward. The sniper, anticipating a target, fired. The plasma bolt slammed into the tabletop, which glowed cherry red for a second before melting into slag. But it had bought them the time they needed. Now Avery roared. He scooped Nia into one arm, holding the serving tray up with the other, and sprinted. He was a blur of motion, weaving through overturned furniture and panicked diners. He saw the flash of another shot from the corner of his eye. He twisted his body, letting the tray take the impact. The metal screamed and buckled, the heat searing through his sleeve. But it held. He reached the hatch and slammed his palm on the release panel. The reinforced door hissed open. He practically threw Nia inside the narrow tube before diving in after her, pulling the hatch closed just as another plasma bolt struck the floor where they had been standing, leaving a smoking, cratered scorch mark. The escape pod was little more than a cramped metal coffin, designed to jettison passengers into a safe orbit for a later pickup. The interior was dark, lit only by a single red emergency light. Avery could hear Nia's ragged breathing next to him, and the frantic, muffled sounds of chaos from the restaurant above. He held his breath, listening. There was a heavy thud on the hatch above them. The attacker was trying to get in. His heart hammered against his ribs. He was unarmed, cornered, and responsible for a child he had met less than 5 minutes ago. His quiet, predictable life had just been violently, irrevocably detonated. The hatch shuddered again, the sound of metal grinding on metal. Suddenly, a new sound joined the cacophony, a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through the very structure of the pod. It was followed by a furious volley of plasma fire, not directed at them, but away. A woman's voice, clear and commanding even through the metal walls, rang out in the Orinth language, a string of sharp, authoritative commands. The sounds of a brief, intense firefight followed, ending with a final, echoing hum, and then silence. Avery remained tense, his muscles coiled, ready for the next attack. The silence stretched. Then, he heard a soft chime, and the escape hatch above them unlocked and hissed open. Light flooded the small space. A figure stood silhouetted against the smoke and flashing emergency lights of the ruined restaurant. It was a woman, tall and poised, dressed in the severe, elegant uniform of an Orinth commander. Her hair, the same impossible shade of optical silver as Nia's, was pulled back in a tight, intricate braid. Her face was angular and proud, her features sharp and intelligent. Her purple eyes, glowing with the same internal light as her daughter's, swept over the interior of the pod, landing first on Nia, then on him. There was a moment of profound relief in her gaze as she saw the girl was safe, quickly replaced by a cool, appraising authority. A plasma pistol was held loosely but expertly in her hand, its barrel still faintly smoking. "Mommy," Nia cried, scrambling out of the pod and into the woman's arms. The commander knelt, embracing her daughter tightly, whispering to her in their melodic tongue. She ran a hand over Nia's head, checking for injuries, her composure a stark contrast to the surrounding devastation. After a moment, she looked up at Avery, who had climbed out of the pod and was now standing, warily surveying the scene. The sniper was gone. The hole in the wall gaped open to the stars. "You are Avery Cole," she stated. It was not a question. Her voice was a low, controlled alto, laced with an undeniable steel. That seems to be the popular question tonight, he replied, his tone dry and hard. He automatically began to assess her the way she stood, the efficiency of her movements, the calm in her eyes. This was a warrior, a leader, and, apparently, his blind date. I am Syra Thal, she said, rising to her full height. She held Nia's hand protectively. I apologize for my tardiness. And for the interruption. Interruption, Avery repeated, a humorless smirk touching his lips. He gestured at the wreckage. You have a talent for understatement, Commander. Syra's gaze did not waver. You saved my daughter's life. Orinth law is clear in these matters. When a life of the royal bloodline is saved from imminent peril by one outside the covenant, a bond must be forged. Avery's blood ran cold. He knew exactly what she was talking about. An oath bond, a binding pact, the last thing on Earth, or off it, that he wanted. No. Thank you, he said flatly. I am not interested. I was just leaving. This is not a request, Syra countered, her voice dropping, taking on a dangerous edge. By saving Nia, you have, by our most sacred laws, initiated the right of protection. You are now her bind guard. Her what? He took a step back. Look, I acted on instinct. I do not want any part of whatever political mess you have gotten yourself into. My involvement ends here. It ends when I say it ends, she snapped, her composure finally cracking to reveal a flicker of desperation. They will not stop. They will come for her again. The law states that the one who acts as the shield in the moment of danger must continue that protection until the threat is neutralized or a new guardian is sanctified. It is a temporary bond, but it is absolute. Avery was about to refuse again, to tell her exactly where she could put her ancient laws, when his eyes caught a detail he had missed in the chaos. Lying near the molten slag of the table was a piece of scorched fabric, torn from the attacker's void suit during the initial explosion. On it was an insignia, a small, embroidered patch that had somehow survived the plasma blast. It depicted a black serpent coiled around a fractured star. The air left his lungs in a rush. The sounds of the restaurant faded. The scent of smoke and ozone vanished. For a moment, he was no longer on the Saffron Ring. He was back in the dust and fire of Cygnus X-1 10 years ago. He saw the faces of his team, heard their final, panicked shouts over the comms. He saw his sister, her bright, defiant eyes, just before the bulkhead collapsed. The mission had been a setup, a betrayal from the inside. They had been sold out to a ruthless mercenary outfit, an outfit whose symbol was a black serpent coiled around a fractured star. Everything inside him went still and cold. The rage he had buried for a decade, the grief he had encased in a wall of cynical detachment, surged back with the force of a supernova. This was not random. The attack on the Orinth Royal, his presence here, the mercenaries, it was all connected. This was not just Sarah's problem anymore. It had just become intensely, violently personal. His gaze snapped back to Sarah, his eyes hard as flint. The thirst for vengeance was a bitter, familiar poison on his tongue. He had spent years trying to find a trail, any lead that would point him to the people responsible for his sister's death. Every lead had gone cold. Every source had dried up. Until now, fate, or whatever passed for it in this chaotic universe, had just dropped the first real clue in a decade right into his lap. And it was clinging to the hand of an Orinth commander. Protecting this child was no longer just an obligation forced upon him by some alien law. It was now his only path to the truth, his only path to retribution. Sarah saw the change in his eyes, the shift from hostile refusal to something far more dangerous, a focused, chilling intensity. Bind guard, Avery said. the word feeling alien and heavy in his mouth. What does it entail? Relief washed over Sarah's features, but she kept her voice steady. You will be bound to Nia's safety. You will stay with us, act as her shield, until we reach a secure location and the threat is identified. He gave a sharp, decisive nod. The choice was not a choice at all. It was an inevitability. He would use them, use their resources, and follow this trail back to its source, and he would burn it to the ground. All right, Commander, he said, his voice low and resolute. You have your guard for 48 hours. That is the standard duration for a temporary field bond. According to interstellar code, we do this by the book, my book, for 48 hours. I will get you and your daughter to safety, and I will find out who is trying to kill you. He paused, his gaze distant, seeing ghosts in the smoke, and why they made the mistake of involving me. The Saffron Ring security forces arrived with the precise, unhurried competence of people who were paid to clean up messes, not prevent them. They cordoned off the ruined restaurant with shimmering hard light barriers, their red and blue strobes adding to the surreal carnage. Avery stood with Sarah and Nia near a service corridor, a temporary island of calm in the swirling chaos. He could feel the stares, the whispers from the other survivors. A human, a commander of the Orinth Royal Fleet, and a child with the silver hair of the high bloodline. It was a picture that screamed scandal. The Bind-Guard bond is active, Sarah said, her voice low. For his ears only. Nia was quiet, holding her mother's hand, her luminous eyes still wide, but now fixed on Avery with a curious intensity. It creates a resonance between you and Nia, a sonic and psychic link. You will feel it when she is in danger, a dissonance, a psychic alarm. Convenient, Avery muttered, his eyes scanning the security officers, cataloging their weapons, their movements, their lines of sight. Old habits died hard. Does it also broadcast our location to every hired gun in the sector? Sarah's lips thinned. It is a possibility. The resonance is a fundamental frequency of our bloodline. It can be shielded, but a powerful enough sensor could potentially track its echo. The bond is a double-edged sword. Mr. Cole. It protects, but it also exposes. Avery, he corrected her automatically. My name is Avery, and if we are going to be bound, you might as well use it. He looked down at Nia. The girl was watching him, her head tilted. The ghost of his sister, Sarah, flickered at the edge of his vision. Sarah had looked at him the same way when he had fixed her favorite toy, a mix of awe and childish trust. He pushed the memory down, hard. Attachments were liabilities. The first thing we do is disappear, he said, his voice all business. Your ship. Docking Bay, 94. It is a diplomatic courier, small and fast, but we will never make it there. The station is already locking down. They are not looking for a Bind-Guard and his charge, Avery said. They are looking for a hero and a victim. We will give them neither. He knelt to Nia's level. Nia, we are going to play a game. It is called the Quiet Mice. We have to move without anyone seeing us. Can you do that? The little girl looked at her mother, who gave a slight nod. Nia then turned back to Avery and nodded solemnly. I am very good at being quiet. He allowed a flicker of a smile. I bet you are. He stood up, his gaze meeting Sarah's. Trust me. Her proud, warrior's face was a mask of conflict. She was a commander, used to giving orders, not taking them. But she was also a mother, and she had seen him move. She had seen how he had shielded her daughter without a moment's hesitation. The law binds me to, she said, her tone clipped. Forget the law, he replied. Trust my expertise. She held his gaze for a long moment, then gave another sharp nod. Lead the way. He did. They bypassed the main corridors, which were now swarming with security and media drones. Avery led them through a labyrinth of maintenance tunnels and cargo conduits, his mind effortlessly mapping the station's schematics from the public blueprints he had idly studied years ago. The air grew thick with the smell of ozone and lubricant. The distant sounds of the station gave way to the hum and clank of massive environmental systems. As they moved, Syra fed him information in clipped, precise sentences. The political situation on her homeworld, Orelon, was volatile. A faction known as the Covenant of Purity, who believed in Orinth genetic supremacy and advocated for severing all ties with other species, particularly humans, was gaining power. They were led by the regent, Harrow Keth, a charismatic traditionalist who saw Sarah's progressive, coalition-building policies as a betrayal of their heritage. Harrow believes our sonic resonance, the very core of our being, is diluted by contact with other species, she explained, her voice tight with anger. He preaches a return to isolationism, claiming it is the only way to preserve our purity. Sounds like a fascist with a thesaurus, Avery commented, prying open a service panel. He helped Naya through the gap before following, Sarah right behind him. This attack was meant to kill you, or at least Naya, to destabilize your position and give him more power. That is the logical conclusion, she conceded. To assassinate the heir apparent would throw the line of succession into chaos. Harrow would be perfectly positioned to seize permanent control. Avery's personal data slate, a device surgically embedded in his forearm, vibrated with an incoming message. He had sent a single, encrypted query to his only trusted contact the moment they were clear of the restaurant. The reply was already here. Rafe was fast. He projected a small, private holodisplay from his wrist. The Black Serpent Mercenary Group was listed as a subsidiary on the quarterly report of a Terran megacorporation, Helios Crown. Chief Executive Officer, Drayden Holt. Publicly, Helios Crown was a pioneer in clean energy. Privately, Rafe's note added, they were the biggest traffickers of dark energy technology in the outer sectors, a volatile and illegal power source. Holt was ruthless, ambitious, and known to have a deep-seated antipathy for xenospecies. It is not just your regent, Avery said, showing Syra the display. He has a human partner, Drayden Holt. His corporation, Helios Crown, bankrolls the mercenaries who attacked you. Sarah's eyes narrowed as she absorbed the information. A human and an Orinth purist, working together. The irony is staggering. Holt gets access to our world's resources if Harrow takes power, and Harrow gets the weapons and funding he needs to enforce his ideology. Suddenly, Avery felt it. A faint, unpleasant thrumming at the base of his skull. A wave of anxiety that was not his own. He glanced at Nia. The little girl had her hands pressed to her temples, her face pale. The resonance. Syra was right. It was a psychic alarm. What is it? Sarah asked, noticing his change in expression. We have company, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. He peered through a grate in the floor, down into the brightly lit transit hub below. He saw them immediately. 2 men in the gray coveralls of station maintenance, but they moved with the coordinated economy of trained soldiers. Their eyes were methodically sweeping the crowds, and one of them held a device that looked like a modified energy scanner. They were hunting for the resonance echo. They were trapped. The corridor behind them was a dead end, and the hub below was compromised. As he watched, the media feeds on the hub's giant view screens began to change. Sarah's official portrait appeared, next to a grainy security, still of Avery shielding Nia. The headline, in bold, universal standard, was sensationalist and ugly. Orinth Commander consorts with human mercenary. Abduction feared. They are painting you as the villain, Syra breathed, her face hardening. This is Harrow's doing. He is controlling the narrative, accusing me of treason before our own council. Another headline flashed. This one from a Terran gossip site. Human gold digger targets alien royalty. Charming, Avery said dryly. The thrumming in his head intensified. The hunters were getting closer. He needed a way out, and he needed to shut down the information war they were losing. He pulled Sarah and Nia back from the grate, into the shadows of the conduit. "Give me access to your ship's comm system," he said. "The diplomatic channels. Full encryption. The Saffron Ring network is compromised. They will trace any transmission." "They can trace what they can find," he countered. "I am not going to broadcast. I am going to build a cage." He worked quickly, his fingers flying across his projected interface. He bypassed the local network entirely, routing a signal through a series of shielded diplomatic relays Syra provided, then bouncing it off a commercial satellite in a decaying orbit. He was not sending a message. He was creating a closed, air-gapped network, a tiny, self-contained bubble of secure data, accessible only to them and to one other person. He firewalled it with layers of his own proprietary code, programs that had never been seen on any public or military network. He built a digital fortress in less than 5 minutes. "Done," he said. "We are off the grid. The news feeds cannot touch us in here, and we can communicate securely." He sent a single message burst to Rafe. "Need a ghost exit. Bay 94. Now." He looked at Syra, who had watched the process with a mixture of awe and suspicion. He had just demonstrated a level of cyber warfare that was supposed to be impossible. "My job was designing security systems," he said, answering her unasked question. "To build the perfect cage, you have to know how the beast thinks." A soft whimper brought his attention back to Nia. The little girl was leaning against her mother, her breathing shallow. The ambient light from her eyes was flickering, and her silver hair seemed less vibrant. "She is not well," Sarah said, her voice strained with worry. She placed a hand on Nia's forehead. "Her resonance is unstable. The sonic harmony that sustains us is out of tune. It happens to the young sometimes, when they are under extreme stress or far from a primary harmonic source. She needs a harmonization chamber." "Which is on Orelon, I presume," Avery said. Syra nodded. "Without it, she will continue to weaken. The resonance is our life force, our connection to the universe. When it falters..." She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. The stakes had just been raised again. It was not just about assassins anymore. It was a race against a biological clock he could not comprehend. His data slate chimed. It was Rafe. "Exit clear. Cargo hauler, the Rusty Wrench. Bay 92. Automated flight plan to a private asteroid outpost. Go." Rafe had also attached a layout of the transit hub, highlighting a series of pressure conduits used for atmospheric regulation. They were small, cramped, and would lead them directly to the cargo bay. "New plan," Avery said. "We are taking a dirtier ride." Getting there was a nightmare. The pressure conduits were not designed for passengers. They were tight, dark, and slick with condensation. Avery went first, with Nia strapped to his back, her small arms wrapped around his neck. He felt her light, steady breathing against his skin, a fragile warmth that was profoundly unsettling. He had not let anyone get that close, physically or emotionally, in 10 years. He could smell the faint, clean scent of her hair, a fragrance like fresh rain and starlight. Suddenly, Nia stirred against his back and whispered, her voice barely audible. "You smell like home." Avery froze in the middle of the tube. The words hit him with the force of a physical blow. Home. What did that even mean? The sterile apartment he kept on the ring. The series of anonymous safe houses from his old life. No. Home was a memory. A sunlit kitchen. The smell of baking bread. And his sister Sarah laughing as she tried to put flour on his nose. She was 16, full of life, planning to be an astrophysicist. He was the one who was supposed to protect her. He had taught her self-defense, how to read a situation, how to be strong. But he had not been there when it mattered. He had been half a galaxy away, on a mission that got her killed. The official report said it was a random act of terrorism, a bombing at the planetary archives where she was studying. He knew it was a lie. It was a message, a loose end from his betrayed mission being tied off. He had sworn off all bonds that day, vowing that he would never again be responsible for someone he cared about. And now, a little alien girl with purple eyes was clinging to his back, whispering that he smelled like home. The irony was a knife in his gut. Avery Sarah's voice came from behind him, laced with concern. "What is it?" He shook his head, pushing the memory away. "Nothing. Almost there." They emerged into the chaotic, noisy world of the cargo bay. Stacks of containers towered over them, and massive robotic loaders rumbled past. The rusty wrench was exactly as its name implied, a battered, ugly freighter that had seen better decades. Rafe stood by the open cargo ramp, dressed as a dock worker, his face grim. "Took you long enough," Rafe said, hustling them aboard. "This whole level is crawling with Helios Crown security, posing as station guards. You need to get out of here." "Rafe, I need you to find something for me," Avery said, his voice low and urgent, as Sarah took Nia further into the ship. "A name. The strategic advisor on my last mission. The one who planned the Cygnus operation. His file was wiped clean after the incident." Rafe's eyes widened slightly. "Avery, that is a ghost. A 10-year-old ghost." "Ghosts leave footprints," Avery insisted. "Find them." Rafe nodded grimly. "I will see what I can do. Be careful. This feels bigger than just a corporate power grab." Before Rafe could leave, a high-frequency screech filled the air, so high it was almost beyond the range of human hearing. But Avery felt it as a physical pressure, a painful spike drilling into his brain. Nia screamed. It was a raw, agonized sound. She collapsed to the floor, her small body convulsing. The light in her eyes went out like a snuffed candle. The psychic alarm in Avery's head was no longer a hum. It was a shriek of pure agony, a feedback loop of terror and pain that made his vision swim. "What is happening?" he grunted, fighting the wave of nausea. "Null waves," Syra cried, dropping to her daughter's side. "They are broadcasting a disruptive frequency. It is tearing her resonance apart." Through the open cargo door, Avery saw them, more of Holt's men, converging on their position, holding bulky devices that were emitting the crippling signal. They had been found. There was no time to fight, no time to run. He had to stop the signal. His eyes darted around the cargo bay, his mind working at impossible speed. The null wave generators were blanketing the area. He could not destroy them all in time. He needed to counteract the wave, not block it. He needed to create a counter-resonance. His gaze fell on the station's public address system, the rows of large, powerful speakers mounted on the ceiling for station-wide announcements. They were powerful, networked, and controlled by the main station computer. It was an insane idea. "Get her inside and seal the door," he yelled at Sarah. He pulled his interface from his forearm, its holographic display flickering to life. He did not have time for elegant hacking. This required a sledgehammer. He slammed his way through the station's commercial network firewall, ignoring alarms and security protocols. He needed control of the audio system, and he needed it now. Code scrolled across his display, a frantic waterfall of data. He found the audio control nexus, a hopelessly outdated system, but one he could manipulate. He did not just want to play a sound. He needed to turn the entire network of speakers into a massive, synchronized phased array. He needed to calculate the exact inverse frequency of the null wave, a harmonic that would cancel it out. The pain in his head was blinding. Nia's silent scream was echoing in his soul. He could feel her life slipping away. He gritted his teeth, pouring every ounce of his concentration into the task. He isolated the null wave frequency, a jagged, ugly spike on his sensor display. He wrote a new audio driver on the fly, a piece of brutal, efficient code that would force the speakers to do something they were never designed to do. He hit execute. For a second, nothing happened. Then, a low hum began to emanate from the speakers throughout the bay. It was not a sound, but a feeling. A deep, foundational vibration that resonated in the metal deck plates and in the bones of everyone present. The hum grew in intensity, the air itself seeming to thicken. It was not a counter-sound. It was a counter-silence, a wave of pure, ordered harmony pushing back against the chaos of the null wave. The screeching in Avery's head subsided, replaced by the calming, structured hum. Inside the ship, he heard Nia's convulsions stop. The Helios Crown mercenaries looked around in confusion, their null wave generators sputtering as the PA system overwhelmed their frequency. Avery did not give them time to recover. He uploaded a feedback loop command, cranking the power to the speakers to maximum. The hum became a deafening, bone-jarring roar. The speakers blew out, one by one, in showers of sparks. But they had done their job. The mercenaries staggered back, clutching their heads. Their own weapons turned against them. Rafe was already closing the cargo ramp. "Go," he yelled. The ship's engines whined to life. Avery stumbled aboard, the psychic backlash leaving him dizzy and sick. The ramp sealed, plunging the cargo hold into darkness. He leaned against the cool metal wall, his body trembling with adrenaline and exhaustion. He found Sarah in the small, sterile medbay, where Nia was lying on a biobed, asleep. Her breathing was even now, and the soft, purple light had returned to her closed eyes. "She is stable," Sarah whispered. She looked up at him, her face a mixture of exhaustion, gratitude, and something else he could not quite decipher. "What you did back there. They will be writing about that in physics journals. You turned a public address system into a resonance weapon. You saved her. Again." He just shook his head, too tired to form a witty reply. All in a day's work for a human gold digger. She flinched at his words, the media headlines still fresh in their minds. She took a step closer. They were standing in the cramped space between the biobed and a bulkhead, the low thrum of the ship's engines the only sound. "Thank you, Avery," she said, her voice soft and stripped of its usual command. And then, before he could process it, she leaned in and kissed him. It was not a passionate kiss, or a romantic one. It was something else entirely. It was desperate, grateful, and profoundly clumsy. A collision of two people pushed to their absolute limit. Her lips were soft, but the contact was jarring. An unexpected moment of warmth in the cold, clinical medbay. They broke apart almost immediately, both of them looking surprised and intensely awkward. A blush crept up Sarah's neck, a fascinating sight on her pale lavender skin. She looked away, clearing her throat. "I apologize," she stammered. "The proud commander momentarily lost. That was inappropriate." "Forget it," he said, his own voice sounding rougher than he intended. He could still feel the phantom pressure of her lips, a spark of connection that terrified him more than any plasma rifle. This was exactly what he had sworn to avoid. Before the awkward silence could become suffocating, his data slate chimed again. A secure message from Rafe. He opened it, grateful for the distraction. The message was short, and it made his blood run cold. "Found your ghost. Avery." The advisor's signature is all over this. He is not just a ghost. He is a puppeteer. He is playing Holt and the Orinth Regent against each other. There is a third party pulling the strings, and the trail leads right back to your old strategic advisor. I do not have a name yet. Just a code name from the old intelligence files. Avery stared at the final word on the display, and the universe tilted on its axis. The past was not just haunting him. It had reached out and wrapped its cold, dead fingers around his present. The codename was Nora. Nora. The name hung in the silent medbay. A single word that dismantled a decade of Avery's carefully constructed defenses. It was not just a name. It was a key. One that unlocked a Pandora's box of betrayal, grief, and a fury so cold it felt like a part of his soul had been flash-frozen. Nora Vale had been his mentor, his strategic advisor, the architect of his career in Black Ops. She was a phantom, a master manipulator who saw people as assets and missions as equations. And she was the one who had planned the Cygnus operation, the one who had sent him and his team, his sister's life, the collateral damage, into a meat grinder. He stared at the codename on his display, the air in his lungs turning to ice. The universe had a sick, poetic sense of humor. He had run from his past for 10 years, only to have it show up at a blind date he never wanted. Syra watched him, her own awkwardness forgotten in the face of the profound, chilling transformation that came over him. The cynical but competent man who had saved her daughter twice was gone, replaced by something harder, sharper, and infinitely more dangerous. His eyes were no longer just wary. They were the eyes of a predator that had caught the scent of its oldest enemy. "Avery," she asked, her voice cautious. "Who is Nora?" "A ghost," he said, his voice a low rasp. He closed the display, the single word burning itself onto the back of his eyelids. "The one who taught me how to build cages. It seems she's been building one around all of us." He pushed off the wall, the exhaustion and the psychic backlash from the fight in the cargo bay forgotten, incinerated by the cold fire of his rediscovered purpose. The dots were connecting with horrifying clarity. A master strategist playing both sides, manipulating a Terran corporation and an Orinth political faction, using the same mercenaries she had used to burn him a decade ago. It was her style, elegant, brutal, and completely devoid of morality. "We are no longer just running," he announced, his gaze meeting Sarah's. "We are hunting. We need proof. Something that will nail Holt and Harrow to the wall and expose the puppeteer pulling their strings. We need to go on the offensive." Their journey on the Rusty Wrench ended at Rafe's base of operations, a hollowed-out asteroid in a forgotten corner of the sector. A smuggler's den turned into a high-tech information brokerage. Inside, the rough-hewn rock walls were a chaotic tapestry of holographic displays, server racks, and humming power conduits. Rafe met them, his usually cheerful face etched with concern. "Welcome to the Roach Motel," Rafe said with a weak smile. "Data checks in, but it never checks out." He led them to a central chamber, where Nia, now awake and seemingly recovered, was cautiously petting Rafe's pet robotic cleaner, a device that resembled a chrome-plated turtle. "We need access to a Helios Crown facility," Avery said, getting straight to the point. "A research lab, something off the books, where they would develop a weapon like the null wave generator." Rafe's fingers danced across a holographic console. "Already on it. Holt is arrogant. He keeps his most sensitive projects close. There's a privately owned moonlet, Cinderfall, about 3 light minutes from here. Officially, it's a geological survey station. Unofficially, it's his personal toy box. Security is state-of-the-art. Biometric scanners, quantum encrypted networks, autonomous defense drones. Every system has a flaw," Avery stated. "Every lock has a key." "This one's a doozy," Rafe warned. "The entire facility is run by a closed AI. To get in, you need to be in the system. I can create a temporary digital identity for you, a maintenance technician, but it will only hold up to a cursory scan, and I can't get 2 of you in." Syra stepped forward. "I must go with him. The weapon they used is designed to counteract Orinth resonance. I will recognize the technology. I can identify its weaknesses." "They will be scanning for Orinth biosignatures," Avery argued. "You'd be a flare in the darkness." My people have spent centuries mastering sonic harmony, she countered, a spark of defiance in her purple eyes. We also know how to create sonic silence. I can dampen my own resonance, shield my biosignature for a short period. It is difficult and dangerous, but I can do it. The heist was set for the next rotation. Rafe procured a decommissioned Helios Crown maintenance shuttle, a small, ugly craft they could use for their approach. The plan was simple in concept, nightmarishly complex in execution. Sierra would dampen her biosignature, while Avery used his forged identity to get them through the outer security checkpoints. Once inside, they would have less than an hour to find the lab, download the data, and get out before the AI purged the temporary credentials and the entire moonlet went into lockdown. The infiltration was a masterclass in tension. Avery, dressed in the gray jumpsuit of a Helios technician, guided the shuttle with practiced ease. His voice calm and steady as he responded to the automated hails from Cinderfall's orbital control. Sarah sat beside him, her eyes closed in concentration, a faint, silvery aura shimmering around her as she suppressed her natural resonance. Avery could feel the change through the BindGuard link. The constant, low-level hum of Nia's presence in the back of his mind grew fainter, as if a veil had been drawn over it. They landed in a deserted service hangar. The air was cold, sterile, and smelled of ionized metal. "Shield is holding," Sierra whispered, her voice strained. "But I do not know for how long." They moved through the corridors, a pair of ghosts in the machine. The facility was eerily silent, run almost entirely by automated systems. They reached the designated research wing, and Avery went to work on the encrypted door panel. His fingers flew across his interface, weaving through layers of security like a surgeon. The lock chimed, and the door slid open. The lab was a cathedral of dark science. In the center of the room, suspended in a magnetic field, was the weapon, the lattice null. It was a terrifyingly beautiful object, a spherical cage woven from black, crystalline filaments that seemed to drink the light from the room. It pulsed with a silent, hungry energy, an anti-music that Avery could feel in his teeth. "This is what they used," Sierra breathed, her hand going to her throat. "It does not just jam the resonance. It inverts it, turns it into a self-consuming paradox. It is designed to shatter the very soul of an Orinth." "Let's find the proof," Avery said, his voice grim. While Sarah analyzed the device, running a passive scan with a small Orinth tricorder, Avery jacked into the main terminal. He ripped through the lab's local network, his code a silent, unstoppable virus. He found what he was looking for in a deeply buried, triple-encrypted directory project funding, shipping manifests, and a series of video logs. He played the most recent one. The image of Drayden Holt appeared, his face smug and predatory. He was speaking to a holographic figure. The figure was Orinth, regal and severe, with the unmistakable markings of the High Council. It was the Regent, Harrow Keth. "The prototypes are effective," Holt was saying. "Once your ascension is complete, Helios Crown will begin full-scale deployment of the lattice null across Orelon. In return, we get exclusive mining rights to the harmonic crystals in the Azure Deep. The agreement stands." Harrow Keth's voice was like stones grinding together. "Sierra Thal and her half-human philosophies are a cancer. Your weapon will be the cure. When the people see their connection to the Great Resonance fail, they will turn to me, to the old ways. They will beg for purity." "We have them," Avery whispered. He began downloading the entire data packet, a process that felt agonizingly slow. As the data transferred, a primal urge, a hunter's instinct, made him dig deeper. He ran a search through the station's personnel files, cross-referencing with the Black Serpent mercenary group. He found a heavily redacted mission file, buried in an archive from 10 years ago. Cygnus X-1, his mission. His heart began to pound, a heavy, frantic drum against his ribs. He sliced through the redactions, his hacking now brutal and direct. He found the file for the mission's strategic advisor. The name was gone, wiped clean. But there was a single, corrupted image file attached, a security still from the mission briefing. He opened it. The image flickered, distorted by data decay. It showed a figure from behind, standing before a tactical map. He could not see the face, which was obscured by a shimmering, pixelated distortion, a quantum mask, designed to defeat facial recognition software. But he saw the posture. The confident set of the shoulders, the slight, almost imperceptible tilt of the head. He knew that posture. He had studied it, learned from it, trusted it. Nora, a wave of pure, black rage washed over him, so potent it made him dizzy. It was not just confirmation. It was a desecration, a violation of a memory he had once held as sacred. This ghost was real, and she had been standing behind him the entire time. He felt an almost uncontrollable urge to smash the console, to put his fist through Holt's smiling face. His hands clenched, his knuckles white. He was a breath away from losing control, from letting the monster he kept chained in his soul off its leash. "Avery!" Sarah's voice cut through the red haze. She had her hand on his arm. Her touch was light, but it anchored him. He looked from the screen to her face. Her glowing purple eyes were filled with concern, not for the mission, but for him. She had seen the change, felt the tremor of his rage. He took a ragged breath, forcing the fury down. Killing was easy. Justice was hard. He had to remember that. For Naya. For his sister. He finished the download, his movements stiff and robotic. "We have what we came for," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Let's go." Their escape was clean, but the moment they cleared Cinderfall's orbit, their private air-gapped network lit up with alerts. The galaxy was on fire. The Covenant of Purity had released a new piece of propaganda. It was an audio file, expertly doctored, pieced together from Avery's comms chatter during his Black Ops days. In it, his voice was cold, ruthless, talking about acceptable losses and collateral damage. The file was overlaid with a picture of Nia, making it sound as if he were discussing the little girl as a disposable asset. The media was calling him the Butcher of Cygnus, a child-napping mercenary holding the Orinth heir for ransom. "They are trying to strip you of all legitimacy," Sarah said, her face a mask of cold fury as she listened to the report. "To turn the human authorities against you." "It's a smart move," Avery admitted, his mind already calculating the fallout. "Makes me a wanted man. It isolates you completely." "They have underestimated me," Sarah said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. She turned to him, her eyes blazing with a fierce, protective light he had never seen before. "They attack my bind guard. They attack my honor. I will not hide in the shadows while they slander the man who saved my daughter's life. I will face them." Before Avery could protest, she had opened a secure channel to the Saffron Ring's Human-Xeno Relations Council, which was in an emergency session to discuss the Orinth hostage crisis. She invoked her right as a royal diplomat to address the assembly. Her holographic image flickered to life, projecting her into the center of the Grand Council chamber. She was magnificent. She stood tall and proud in the cramped cockpit of the shuttle, but her projection commanded the vast hall. She did not raise her voice. She did not plead. She spoke with the unshakable authority of a commander and the fierce conviction of a mother. "I am Syra Thal of the Orinth High Bloodline," she began, her voice resonating with power. "The child, Nia Thal, is my daughter. She is not a hostage. She is under the protection of her legally appointed bind guard, Avery Cole." She looked directly into the main camera, as if addressing every human and alien in the galaxy. "Mr. Cole is a man of honor who acted to save my daughter from assassins sent by traitors within my own government. The bond between them was forged in fire and bravery, and it is sacred under our most ancient laws. I stake my name, my title, and my life on his integrity. Any attack on him is an attack on the Orinth crown." It was a stunning gambit, a declaration of war against Harrowketh on an interstellar stage. The council was thrown into an uproar. To give them safe passage to Orelon, they decreed, the bond must be formalized. They would have to undergo the rite of sound testimony, a brief but public ceremony on the saffron ring that would legally bind them in the eyes of both human and Orinth law. There was no other choice. They returned to the saffron ring, not as fugitives, but as political players in a very dangerous game. The rite was held in a small, open-air amphitheater, surrounded by security. The air buzzed with the whispers of diplomats and the hum of media drones. Avery stood opposite Syra, a tall, slender column of harmonic crystal between them. He felt ridiculously exposed. His expertise was in shadows and secrets, not public ceremonies. He looked at Syra. She wore formal Orinth robes of deep indigo and silver, and she looked every bit the royal commander. But when her eyes met his, he saw the same vulnerability, the same uncertainty he felt. This was forcing them to put a name to the fragile, unspoken thing that was growing between them. "Place your hands upon the crystal," the Orinth arbiter intoned. They reached out, their fingers brushing as they touched the cool, smooth surface. A low hum emanated from the crystal, vibrating up their arms. "Speak the vow of trust," the arbiter commanded. Sarah spoke first, her voice clear and unwavering, though Avery could see the pulse beating in her throat. "I, Sarah Thal, accept the shield of Avery Cole. I place my trust in his hands, his skill, and his heart. As he guards my blood, I shall guard his honor." Then it was his turn. He looked at Sarah, at the fierce loyalty in her eyes, at the memory of her clumsy, grateful kiss. He thought of Nia, and the way she had whispered that he smelled like home. The words came, not from his head, but from a place he had locked away long ago. "I, Avery Cole, accept the charge of Sarah Thal. I offer my hands, my skill, and my life as her shield. Her fight is my fight. Her daughter is my daughter, until the threat is ended." The crystal flared with a brilliant purple light, and the hum rose in pitch, a perfect, harmonious chord that washed over the entire amphitheater. The bond was sealed. It was no longer just a legal necessity. It was a public promise. The momentary peace was shattered less than an hour later. They were in a secure diplomatic suite, preparing for their departure, when it happened. Syra was in a meeting with Rafe, going over the data they had stolen. Nia was in the adjoining room, coloring on a data slate. Avery had designed the security for the suite himself. The doors were sealed. The sensors were active. It should have been impenetrable. He felt the warning not as a thought, but as a violent, sickening lurch in his soul. The BindGuard link, a gentle hum in his mind, suddenly went silent. It was like a string being cut, a sudden, terrifying void. He did not shout. He did not hesitate. He burst into Nia's room, just in time to see a figure in the black armor of a serpent mercenary hauling the child through a smoking, freshly cut hole in the exterior wall. A second mercenary stood guard, raising his plasma rifle. Left on the floor was a data chip. The message was clear. They wanted to trade. But Avery was not a trader. He was a builder, and he had built for this. The simple, elegant tunic Nia was wearing was one of his designs, a gift he had given her after the cargo bay attack. It was woven with a neuroconductive mesh, linked to a biometric monitor he controlled. It was a panic button a child could not lose. He triggered it. A high-frequency energy pulse, calibrated to disrupt motor functions, erupted from the tunic. The mercenary holding Nia cried out, his arms going rigid, his muscles locking. He dropped the child. Avery was already moving. He threw a chair at the second mercenary, not to injure, but to spoil his aim. The plasma bolt went wide, scorching the bulkhead. Avery was on them in a blur. He disarmed the second mercenary with a brutal series of strikes, a flow of violence that was terrifyingly efficient. He slammed the man's head against the wall, and he crumpled to the floor. The first mercenary was still struggling against the stun effect. Avery grabbed him, and through the man's helmet, he spoke, his voice a low, deathly promise. "You tell your masters," he growled, "that nothing they have, nothing they can offer, is worth what will happen to them if they ever touch her again." He then delivered a single, precise blow that sent the man into unconsciousness. He scooped up Nia, who was crying and terrified but unharmed. He held her close, his heart pounding with a ferocity that stole his breath. It was not the thrill of the fight. It was the raw, primal fear of almost losing her. This feeling, this terrifying, soul-deep attachment, was what he had run from for a decade. And now, holding this small, trembling child in his arms, he knew he would never run from it again. Sarah burst into the room, her face pale with terror. Rafe right behind her. She saw Nia, saw Avery holding her, and she stopped, her hand flying to her mouth. Later, aboard a new ship, a sleek, fast courier Rafe had procured, named the Larkspur. The silence between them was thick with unspoken emotions. They had won the battle, but the war was escalating. Nia was asleep in a small cabin, safe for now. Avery and Sarah stood at the main viewport, watching the golden arc of the saffron ring recede as they plotted a course for the phantom menace of Orelon. "I was afraid," Sarah said quietly, not looking at him. Not like a commander assessing a threat, but like a mother. "I realized that my title, my duty, none of it mattered as much as getting back to that room. To the two of you." "I know the feeling," Avery admitted, his voice rough. He looked at his hands. They were steady now, but he could still feel the memory of the violence, the cold satisfaction of it. He was afraid too, not of the mercenaries, or Holt, or even the ghost named Nora. He was afraid of the man he became when the people he cared about were threatened. He was afraid of how much he was starting to care. "We have to fight them," she said, finally turning to face him. "Holt, Harrow, this Nora, we have to see it through." "We will," he promised. "But we do it together," she insisted, her gaze intense. "This is not just your revenge, and it is not just my political battle. It is ours now. We do not have to promise a future. Avery, we just have to promise that we will fight for one, side by side." He looked at her, at the commander, the mother, the woman who had stood before the galaxy and staked her honor on his. He reached out and took her hand, her fingers laced with his, a silent, binding agreement that was stronger than any rite or crystal. Side by side, he agreed. The Larkspur's engines hummed, and the ship slipped into the non-space of a jump gate, a silver needle aimed at the heart of a world made of crystal and sound, where the truth and his vengeance were waiting. Orelon did not appear in the viewport so much as it bloomed. The transition from the flat, non-space of the jump gate was like a curtain rising on a masterpiece. The planet was a swirl of violet, indigo, and rose, wrapped in oceans of luminous, silver mist. It was not silent. Avery could feel a sound, a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through the hull of the Larkspur. A note so vast and ancient, it felt like the planet itself was breathing. "The great resonance," Sarah said, her voice a reverent whisper. She stood beside him, her commander's posture softened by the sight of her home. The song of the world. Avery could see what she meant. The continents were not made of rock and soil in the Terran sense, but of massive, crystalline mountain ranges that caught the light of their parent star and refracted it into a billion shimmering rainbows. These were the Singing Mountains, each one a colossal harmonic crystal that contributed its own unique note to the planet's chorus. It was beautiful, but to Avery, it was also a tactical nightmare. A world built on sound was a world uniquely vulnerable to the weapons Holt and Harrow now possessed. Their landing was tense. Sierra's diplomatic codes were still valid, granting them clearance at the capital city of Ethel, a breathtaking metropolis of spiraling crystal towers and gracefully arching bridges suspended over the mist oceans. But the welcome was cold. The air traffic controller's voice was clipped and formal. The honor guard that met them at the landing platform was rigid, their faces grim and unreadable. The news feeds Avery had monitored during their journey had done their work. Sierra's image was now tarnished by accusations of treason, of bringing a human mercenary, a butcher, to their sacred world. The city itself was in turmoil. The usual harmonious chimes of daily life were discordant, replaced by the heated sounds of public arguments and the low, angry hum of protest crowds. Banners of the Covenant of Purity, bearing Harrow Keth's severe visage, hung from balconies. He had whipped the populace into a frenzy of xenophobic fear. Sarah was no longer just a political opponent. She was an existential threat, a harbinger of human corruption. The High Council was deadlocked, paralyzed by the Regent's aggressive maneuvering. "He has poisoned them against me," Sarah said, her voice tight as they were escorted through the city to the central spire, the location of the harmonic conflux. Nia held her hand, her small face pale, her luminous purple eyes wide with confusion at the palpable hostility in the air. The harmonic conflux was the heart of Orelon, a fusion of temple and technology that defied human categorization. It was a vast, open-air structure, its roof a dome of interwoven crystal that amplified the planet's song into a palpable energy field. In the center of the main chamber was the harmonization chamber, a sphere of woven light and sound where the Orinth came to align their personal resonance with that of the planet. It was their hospital, their sanctuary, and their most sacred site. "Nia must go in immediately," Sierra said, her maternal concern overriding all political considerations. "Her resonance is dangerously frayed." Avery stood guard at the entrance, a solitary human figure in a place of alien sanctity. He felt the stares of the Orinth acolytes, a mixture of fear, curiosity, and undisguised contempt. He ignored them, his attention focused outward, his senses on high alert. He could feel the bind guard link, the faint, worried hum of Nia's life force, and it was getting weaker, more erratic. This was not just a political battle anymore. It was a medical emergency. Sierra led Nia into the chamber. The sphere of light brightened as they entered, the ambient hum rising in pitch to a pure, healing tone. Avery watched, his hand resting on the grip of the plasma pistol concealed under his jacket. He trusted nothing and no one on this world except the woman inside that sphere of light. He felt the attack before he heard it. The bind guard link did not just go silent. It was violently ripped apart. A wave of pure, psychic agony slammed into him, a silent scream of such intensity that he staggered, dropping to one knee. It was the echo of Nia's pain, magnified 100-fold. Inside the conflux, the harmonization chamber exploded, not with fire, but with a horrifying implosion of light and sound. The woven energy field collapsed, the perfect, healing tone twisting into a discordant shriek of static. The lattice null had been activated. Someone had planted a device, a resonance bomb, at the heart of their most sacred place. Nia collapsed. Her small body fell to the crystalline floor, the light in her eyes extinguishing. Sarah cried out, a raw, desperate sound that cut through the chaos, rushing to her daughter's side. The chamber was now a cage of sonic chaos, the very air vibrating with a toxic, life-destroying frequency. Avery did not have time for rage. He ran. He burst into the chamber, the null wave washing over him, a nauseating force that felt like his own atoms were being shaken apart. He saw Nia, lifeless on the floor, and Sarah trying to shield her, her own resonance flickering under the assault. The Orinth acolytes were in disarray, their own connection to the great resonance severed, leaving them weak and disoriented. Their most advanced healing technology had been turned into a weapon against them. Humanity, however, had a long and storied history of fixing things with whatever was lying around. "Get back to the ship," he yelled to Sarah. The medbay. Now he scooped up Nia's limp form, his heart a block of ice in his chest. She was frighteningly light. He sprinted from the chamber, ignoring the shouts of the acolytes. Back on the Larkspur, he laid Nia on the biobed. Her vital signs were critical, her biosignature fading. The ship's advanced medical systems were useless. They were not equipped to treat a crisis of sonic resonance. "Her harmony is collapsing," Sarah said, her voice choked with tears. "She is decoupling from the world, from herself." "Then we will have to give her a new one," Avery said, his mind a whirlwind of desperate calculation. He ran to the ship's small fabrication unit, the advanced 3D printer used for creating spare parts and tools. He began pulling up schematics, not for weapons, but for musical instruments, for frequency generators, for anything that manipulated sound waves. He grabbed a discarded power conduit and a handful of wires from a service panel. He found a diagnostic scanner and ripped out its resonating crystal. He fed the designs into the fabricator, modifying them on the fly, his fingers a blur across the console. He was not just building a machine. He was improvising a solution from first principles. The fabricator whirred to life, extruding a strange, harp-like frame of conductive polymer. He integrated the crystal, wired the power conduit, and connected it all to his personal data slate. What he held in his hands a minute later was an ugly, impossible thing. A Frankenstein's monster of Terran engineering and alien components. It was a portable, jury-rigged counter-resonance generator, a pocket-sized sonic life support machine. "It needs a baseline frequency," he muttered, his mind racing. A steady, rhythmic pattern to anchor her resonance, to give it something to mimic. He looked at the chaotic energy readings coming from Nia. He could not use any of the planet's frequencies. They were all corrupted by the lattice null. He looked at Sarah, then at Nia. Then he closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He pressed the scanner from the device to his own chest, directly over his heart. He rerouted the input. The baseline would be him. His own steady, rhythmic, stubbornly persistent human heartbeat. He placed the harp-like frame over Nia's small chest. He took another deep, calming breath, forcing his adrenaline-spiked heart rate to slow, to become a steady, reliable anchor. The device hummed to life. A soft, low-frequency pulse began to emanate from it, a rhythmic thrum that was perfectly synchronized with his own pulse, his own life. On the biomonitor, a miracle happened. Nia's chaotic energy signature began to stabilize. The jagged peaks and valleys smoothed out, her fading resonance finding the anchor of his heartbeat, latching onto it, mimicking it. The flickering light in her eyes steadied, then began to glow with a faint but consistent purple light. Sarah stared, her hands covering her mouth, tears streaming down her face. She was witnessing an act of pure, unadulterated human ingenuity, a moment of profound hope conjured from scrap metal and sheer force of will. In a world of singing crystals and cosmic harmony, her daughter was being saved by the simple, biological rhythm of a stubborn human heart. Nia was stable, but the fight was far from over, leaving her in Sarah's care. Avery walked off the ship, the data chip containing the evidence from Cinderfall clutched in his hand. He strode back towards the conflux, his face set like granite. The time for hiding was over. He found Harrowketh in the Grand Plaza, before the main temple, addressing a crowd of his followers. The regent stood on a raised dais, his voice booming with righteous fury, blaming the desecration of the conflux on the humans' corrupting influence. Avery did not shout. He did not run. He walked calmly through the crowd, which parted before him, the Orinth people staring at the lone human with a mixture of fear and hatred. He walked to the foot of the dais and stood there, silent, until Harrow was forced to stop and acknowledge him. "The human butcher," Harrow sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "You dare show your face here, after what you have done." "I have done nothing," Avery said, his voice quiet but carrying an undeniable weight that cut through the plaza's tension. "But you, Regent, have been very busy." He raised the data chip. "I have proof of your treason. A video of you and your human business partner, Drayden Holt, plotting to poison this world with his weapons in exchange for its resources." He projected the video into the air from his data slate. The images of Holt and Harrow flickered to life, their treacherous conversation echoing across the silent plaza. The crowd gasped. Harrow's followers stared, their certainty beginning to waver. Harrow Keth, however, was a master politician. He laughed, a short, barking sound of derision. Human tricks, he roared, doctored images and fabricated sounds. "Will you believe this alien filth, this noise, over the word of your regent? He has brought nothing but chaos and destruction to our home." "The only chaos here is the one you created," Avery shot back. "You talk about purity, but you deal in secrets and sell your people's future to the highest bidder. There is a word for that on my world. Harrow, hypocrite." Harrow's face purpled with rage. He was losing the crowd. He needed to change the narrative, to seize back control. He descended from the dais, his eyes blazing with fanaticism. He stopped before Avery, his taller frame looming over the human. "Your words are meaningless," Harrow hissed. "On Orelon, we settle matters with honor, not with lies. I challenge you to a duel, a Kael'thas, a trial of resonance and resolve, right here, right now." A murmur of shock went through the crowd. The Kael'thas was an ancient, binding form of trial by combat. "If I win," Harrow declared, his voice ringing with authority, "your bond with Sarathal is nullified. You will be cast out, and she will be stripped of her title and face the council for her crimes. If you win, I will abdicate the regency." It was a trap. Avery was a trained soldier, but he was not an Orinth warrior. He did not know their fighting styles, their techniques. But to refuse was to admit guilt in the eyes of these people. To refuse was to lose everything. He looked at the faces in the crowd, saw the doubt, the fear. He had to do this. For Sarah, for Naya. "I accept," Avery said, his voice steady. The plaza was cleared, forming a large circle. Harrow was handed a staff, a long, black rod capped with a resonating crystal that glowed with a sickly, yellow light. A sonic nullifier. Avery stood opposite him, unarmed, relying only on his training and his wits. The duel began. Harrow was fast, his movements fluid and graceful. He did not try to strike Avery directly. Instead, he swung the staff in wide arcs, and with each swing, a wave of absolute silence radiated outwards. The spot where Avery stood was suddenly devoid of all sound. The hum of the crowd, the song of the mountains, his own footsteps all gone. It was profoundly disorienting. A weapon that attacked the senses themselves. Harrow lunged, his body a blur within the sphere of silence. Avery could not hear him coming. He could not hear the whistle of the staff through the air. But humanity had not evolved on a world of perfect harmony. They had evolved in a world of dirt and stone and imperfect senses. Avery dropped to the ground, feeling the faint vibration of Harrow's footfalls through the crystal paving stones. He read the shift in the regent's weight, the subtle disturbance in the air. He rolled aside, the staff smashing the spot where he had been standing, cracking the crystal with a silent percussion he felt in his bones. He came up. His eyes narrowed, adapting. He stopped listening and started watching. He watched the dust motes in the air, how they swirled in the wake of Harrow's silent movements. He watched the play of light on Harrow's body, reading the tension in his muscles, the intention in his eyes. He was fighting not with his ears, but with every other sense he possessed. The crowd watched, mesmerized. The human was not fighting like an Orinth. He was fighting like an animal, a creature of instinct and reflexes, dodging and weaving, turning Harrow's sophisticated weapon into a clumsy club. The regent grew more and more frustrated, his graceful movements becoming angry. Wild swings. Avery saw his opening. Harrow, in his rage, overcommitted to a powerful downward strike. The planet's gravity, roughly 80% of Earth's standard, had been a subtle but constant factor. Avery had felt lighter, faster, since he had arrived. He coiled his legs, muscles adapted to a stronger gravitational pull, and exploded upwards. It was not a graceful leap. It was a human leap, full of raw, explosive power. He twisted in the air, his foot catching Harrow squarely in the chest. The regent, not expecting such a powerful strike, was lifted off his feet. Avery used his momentum, his other foot hooking behind Harrow's head, and wrenched. Harrow Keth crashed to the ground, the sonic staff flying from his grasp and shattering. The sound of the world rushed back in, a deafening roar. Avery landed hard, a white-hot spike of agony shooting through his side. One of Harrow's earlier, glancing blows had connected. He could feel the sharp, grating ends of at least 2 broken ribs. He had won. He stood over the fallen regent, breathing heavily, the pain in his side a raging fire. The plaza was silent for a moment, and then a single Orinth began to clap, then another, and another. Soon, the entire plaza was filled with a sound Harrow Keth had tried so hard to silence. Sarah ran to him then, her face a storm of conflicting emotions. She saw him clutch his side, saw the pain etched on his face, and the political victory vanished from her eyes. All that was left was fear. "You are hurt," she whispered, her hand hovering over his side, afraid to touch him. "Just a scratch," he grunted, but a wave of dizziness washed over him, and he leaned on her for support. In that moment, looking into her terrified, luminous eyes, he saw the truth. She was not looking at a bind-guard or a political ally. She was looking at him, and she was terrified of losing him. The realization hit him harder than any physical blow. Harrow Keth rose to his feet, his face a mask of humiliation and incandescent rage. He had been beaten, publicly, by a human. He was honor-bound to abdicate. But his fanaticism was stronger than his honor. "This changes nothing," he bellowed, his voice raw with hatred. He pointed a trembling finger, not at Avery, but at the desecrated harmonic conflux. "If you proceed with any grand ritual, if you attempt to use this alien to restore the conflux, I will see it all turn to dust. I will shatter the great crystals. I would rather this world go silent forever than have it sing a human song." With that final, chilling threat, he turned and stormed away, his remaining loyalists following him, leaving a fractured city and a poisoned victory in their wake. Harrow's threat lingered in the air like a poison, a final act of spite that soured Avery's victory. The crowd in the plaza, once united in their applause, was now fractured again, a sea of uncertain, fearful faces. They had a broken temple, a dying heir, and a deposed regent who had just promised to shatter their entire world rather than see it healed by an outsider. Avery stood beside Sarah in the damaged conflux, his side tightly bound with an Orinth biofabric that both numbed the pain of his broken ribs and promoted rapid healing. It was a marvel of medical technology, but it could not touch the deeper ache of exhaustion that had settled in his bones. Nia was resting on the larkspur, her life sustained by the ugly, beautiful machine he had built. A machine that tethered her fading harmony to his own steady human heartbeat. But it was a temporary fix, a biological patch on a catastrophic system failure. "His threat is not idle," Syra said, her voice heavy. She gazed at the shattered harmonization chamber, at the heart of her culture that now lay in ruins. The great crystals that form the Singing Mountains are ancient and fragile. A coordinated sonic assault, focused on their resonant fractures, could cause a cascade of destruction. Harrow still has loyalists in the sonic infantry. He can do it. The newly formed Interim Council, a collection of shell-shocked Orinth elders who had once been swayed by Harrow's rhetoric, now looked to Sarah for guidance. They were adrift in a sea of silence, their planetary song corrupted, their future uncertain. "Nia cannot survive long on this external anchor," Syra continued, her gaze finding Avery's. There was a new fire in her eyes, a resolve forged in the crucible of the last few hours. "And neither can our people." The null wave attack did more than just break this chamber. It introduced a dissonance, a virus in the Great Resonance. It is slowly sickening everyone on the planet. We are all becoming decoupled. "There is only one path forward," she declared, turning to face the council. Her voice, once just a commander's, now rang with the authority of a queen. "We must perform the grand harmonization rite. We must use the conflux to reboot the entire planetary network, purge the dissonance and restore our song." An elder, his crystalline skin pale with fear, spoke up. "But Commander, the region's threat, and the conflux is damaged. A rite of that magnitude is impossible. It could overload the remaining systems entirely." "We will not be using the damaged systems," Syra said, her eyes finding Avery's again, a silent communication passing between them. "We will be using a new one." She looked back at the council. "We will use the people themselves as the amplifier, and we will use my bind guard, and the pure, untainted rhythm of his heart as the source code for the reboot." It was the ultimate gamble, a desperate, beautiful, and completely insane plan. They would turn the entire population of Ethel into a single, biological choir, using Avery's heartbeat as the conductor's baton to guide them back to harmony. It was a declaration of faith, not in ancient technology, but in the fusion of two cultures, in the resilience of community, and in the stubborn, biological rhythm of a single human. The preparations were frantic. Word went out across the city. The people, desperate for hope, began to gather. They filled the Grand Plaza, their numbers swelling until thousands of Orinth stood shoulder to shoulder, their faces turned toward the broken conflux. Avery stood on the central dais, the pain in his side a dull throb, his counter-resonance device now wired into the primary amplification crystal of the temple. It was his job to provide the beat. Syra stood beside him, ready to lead her people in the ancient chant. Nia had been brought from the ship, resting on a ceremonial cot nearby, her survival now intrinsically linked to the success of this ritual. As the last light of the star faded and the luminous mists began to glow, Syra placed her hand on Avery's chest, directly over his heart. The touch was not romantic. It was tactical, a final systems check. She could feel the steady, powerful rhythm of his life. He was calm, a solid anchor in a world of chaos. Her gaze was fierce, her resolve absolute. But beneath it, he saw the terrifying depth of her fear and of her trust. "If you fall," she whispered, her voice a battlefield vow, a sacred promise spoken in the quiet before the storm, "I will carry half your heartbeat. Our people will sing to your memory, and we will find our way home." It was the most profound declaration of love he had ever heard, a promise not of forever, but of a shared fight to the very last breath. He covered her hand with his own. "I am not planning on falling." She gave him a small, fierce smile, then turned to her people. She raised her arms, and a hush fell over the tens of thousands gathered in the plaza. She began to sing. It was not a song of complex melody, but a single, pure, foundational note. The sound rippled outwards, and the people answered, their voices joining hers, a low, powerful hum that vibrated in the crystal beneath their feet. Avery activated his device. His heartbeat, amplified and translated into a pure sonic pulse, merged with their chant. It was a simple, steady rhythm, the most basic sound of life, and it gave their formless hum a structure, a beat. It was the sound of two worlds merging, the ancient song of Orelon finding a new cadence in the pulse of a human heart. And then the sky burned. Without warning, the heavens were filled with ships. They were not Orinth. They were the sleek, predatory black cruisers of Helios Crown. Hatches opened, and hundreds of figures in the black armor of the Serpent mercenaries descended on jetpacks, their plasma rifles lighting up the twilight. From the lead ship, a massive, system-wide broadcast ripped through the atmosphere. Drayden Holt's voice, amplified and arrogant, boomed across the planet. The time for negotiation is over. This world and its resources now belong to Helios Crown. Simultaneously, a network of satellites, previously hidden in high orbit, activated. A crimson web of energy lines flared to life above them. The satellite-based lattice null. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. The harmonious hum of the crowd shattered into a million screams of agony. The very crystals of the conflux groaned, and spiderweb cracks raced across the great dome. The amplified null wave was a physical force, a hammer blow of pure chaos that threatened to tear the planet apart. Avery felt the psychic feedback as a thunderclap in his skull. Nia's cot, protected by a localized version of his device, was an island of stability. But the rest of the world was coming undone. "Do not stop!" he roared at Sarah over the din. She was on her knees, her hands pressed to her temples, fighting the sonic assault. "Keep singing. Follow my lead." He recalibrated his device on the fly, no longer just providing a beat, but actively fighting the null wave. He analyzed its jagged, chaotic frequency and began modulating his own output, turning his heartbeat into a weaponized counter-rhythm. He was not just a conductor anymore, he was a shield. He pushed the modified frequency into the planetary amplification system. "Sing this," he yelled, and the new, more complex rhythm pulsed through the crystal dais, a pattern of defiance against the wave of pain. Sarah staggered to her feet, blood trickling from her nose. She looked at him, at his unwavering resolve. She heard the new rhythm, the human rhythm, the rhythm of his heart fighting for them. She took a deep breath and sang, her voice raw but clear, matching the new cadence, one by one, then in dozens, then in hundreds. Her people joined her. They pushed through the pain, their voices rising together, a choir of thousands singing in time with a single human heart, their collective will a rising tide against Holt's technological tsunami. Miles away, in the silent void of his asteroid base, Rafe and Dira saw the Helios fleet appear. He was their only remote support, a ghost in the machine fighting a one-man shadow war. Holt's network was a fortress, but Rafe had found a crack. The satellite grid was powerful, but its command and control system had been outsourced, a fatal act of corporate arrogance. Rafe's fingers became a blur of motion across his holographic console. He was not trying to break down the door. He was picking the lock. He fought off Holt's security AI, countering its attacks with his own custom-built codebreakers. It was a silent, frantic duel fought in a dimension of pure information. On Orelon, the battle raged. The Serpent mercenaries were advancing on the conflux, their plasma fire cutting through the terrified crowd. But the Orinth people were not just victims anymore. Emboldened by Sierra's song, they began to fight back. They had no weapons, but they had their resonance. They focused their voices, creating concussive blasts of sound that staggered the mercenaries, throwing off their aim. The conflux itself began to change. As the people sang, their harmony stabilized by Avery's heartbeat. The great crystals began to glow. But it was not their usual serene violet. It was a new color, a vibrant, breathtaking purplish pink. The color of a Terran sunrise, mixed with an Orelon twilight. It was the color of their two species, their two life songs, merging into something new, something stronger. In orbit, Rafe found his opening. A single, unprotected maintenance port in the satellite network's master control program. He poured a river of corrupted data into it, a logic bomb that began to replicate, spreading through the entire system. Holt's voice, which had been monologuing about destiny and profit, was suddenly cut off. The crimson web of the lattice null flickered. On the ground, the sonic pressure lessened. The choir's song grew louder, more powerful, fueled by a surge of hope. The purplish-pink light from the conflux intensified, pulsing in time with Avery's heart, a defiant beacon against the darkness. The lattice null satellites began to overload. Their energy matrix, unable to cope with the combined feedback of Rafe's logic bomb and the massive, focused counter-resonance from the planet below, went into a cascading failure. One by one, they exploded in silent, brilliant flashes of light, a final, self-destructive crescendo. The wave of sonic agony vanished. The song of the people of Ethel swelled into a triumphant, planet-wide anthem of victory. Holt's ground forces, their primary weapon gone, their command in disarray, were quickly overwhelmed. On the bridge of his flagship, Drayden Holt stared in disbelief as his multi-trillion credit invasion collapsed into ruin. His ship's systems were failing, and Orinth security vessels were closing in. He was about to order a retreat when his private comm line chimed. He opened it. A featureless, shadowy avatar appeared on his screen. "You have failed," a synthesized voice said. The voice of his anonymous backer, the ghost named Nora. "This wasn't in your projections," Holt screamed. "The human. He wasn't supposed to be able to do this." "An unforeseen variable," the voice said, without a hint of emotion. "Your usefulness has come to an end." The line went dead. Seconds later, an Orinth boarding party breached the bridge. Drayden Holt's war was over. He was captured, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. He surrendered without a fight, but not before delivering a final, spiteful piece of information to his captors. "You think this was about Harrow?" he spat at the Orinth captain. "He was a pawn, just like me. There was someone else, someone feeding us both information, playing us against each other like puppets. You have not won. You have just eliminated one of his pieces from the board." Down on the planet, as the last of the mercenaries were rounded up, a different kind of victory was occurring. The grand harmonization rite was complete. The new, stronger harmony settled over the world, a healing balm on its sonic wounds. On the cot, Nia's eyes fluttered open. She sat up, not weak or disoriented, but clear-eyed and whole. She looked at her mother, at Avery, and at the thousands of faces watching her. She took a breath, and for the first time in her life, she sang. Her voice was pure, perfect, and effortlessly in tune with the planet's restored song. Her resonance was healed. A wave of joyous sound swept through the crowd. They had their world back. They had their future back. The celebration was cut short by a new, piercing alarm from within the conflux. Red lights flashed from a secondary spire, a backup control nexus. On the main view screen, a new message appeared. A recorded message from Harrow Keth, his face a twisted mask of insane rage. "If I cannot have this world," he snarled, "then no one will." A countdown timer appeared. 0010. He had triggered the self-destruct on the secondary resonance core. Its destruction would not shatter the planet, but it would cripple the entire network, undoing everything they had just fought for. Chaos erupted again as people began to flee. Sarah yelled orders, trying to organize an evacuation of the inner temple. But Avery was not looking at the exit. He was looking at the secondary spire. He could see the core chamber, its crystalline walls glowing an angry, unstable red. And he saw the failsafe, a manual override system, a massive valve that needed to be physically turned to vent the energy overload. The automated systems were failing. It had to be done by hand. He ran. He sprinted toward the spire, ignoring Sarah's frantic shout. He burst into the core chamber. The heat was a physical blow, the air thick with the smell of burning crystal. The valve was huge, a wheel of solid metal, glowing cherry red. He grabbed it. The pain was immediate and absolute. Searing, unimaginable agony shot up his arm as the superheated metal met his flesh. He roared, a raw, inhuman sound, and pushed. His muscles screamed, the skin of his palms vaporizing. The wheel resisted, its mechanism half melted. He channeled every ounce of his strength, every bit of his rage and his fear and his love for the woman and child he was protecting, into that single, desperate act. The sound of his own bones cracking under the strain was lost in the roar of the overloading core. With a final, groaning shriek of tortured metal, the valve turned. The red glow in the chamber subsided, the energy safely vented, the alarm cut off. He had done it. He collapsed to the floor, his right arm a blackened, useless ruin from his fingertips to his elbow. He looked at it, a detached, clinical curiosity, momentarily overriding the tidal wave of pain. He had saved the core. He had saved their victory. But the cost was written in his own ruined flesh. He heard Sarah scream his name, and then the world dissolved into a merciful darkness. He awoke to the sound of a single, low note, a resonant hum that seemed to come from inside his own body. For a moment, he thought it was the lingering echo of the grand harmonization rite, the song of Orelon seeping into his dreams. But as consciousness returned, so did the pain. It was a distant, muted throbbing, a caged beast held at bay by powerful alien medicine. He opened his eyes. He was not on the Larkspur. He was in a room of serene, glowing crystal, the walls themselves seeming to breathe with a soft, violet light. Sierra was asleep in a chair beside his bed, her commander's poise dissolved in exhaustion, her head resting on her arms. Her silver hair was a mess, and there was a dried tear track on her cheek. The sight of her, so vulnerable and so close, hit him with a force that had nothing to do with his injuries. He tried to sit up, and the low note sounded again, this time accompanied by a faint, melodic chime. He looked down at his right arm. It was not the blackened, ruined thing he remembered from the core chamber. His arm was there, the skin pale and laced with a network of faint, silvery scars. But it was whole. Encasing it from his wrist to his elbow was a breathtakingly intricate framework of polished, silvery metal and thin, crystalline fibers that resembled the strings of a harp. The device was not clamped onto him. It seemed to be fused with his skin, the metal flowing seamlessly into his flesh. As he flexed his fingers, the fibers vibrated, and the low, resonant note sounded again. It is not a splint, Bindguard. An Orinth healer, an elderly male with kind, luminous eyes, had entered the room silently. It is a song, a therapeutic resonator. Your bones were shattered, your nerves and muscles flash-fused. Our medicine could regrow the tissue, but the trauma, the dissonance of the injury, remained. The resonator helps your body remember its harmony. The healer gestured to the device. Each movement you make, each flex of a muscle, will create a note. In time, as you heal, you will learn to control the notes. Your arm will learn to sing again. Avery stared at the biological instrument grafted to his body, a symbol of his sacrifice, rebuilt with the very culture he had saved. He had taken the worst their world could throw at him, and they had given him a piece of their music in return. The irony was not lost on him. Syra stirred, her head snapping up, her eyes, clouded with sleep, focused on him, and a wave of profound, unguarded relief washed over her face. She was at his side in an instant, her hand hovering over his, afraid to touch the strange, musical brace. "Avery," she breathed, his name a prayer. "Just a scratch," he rasped, his throat dry. He tried for a smirk, but his lips would not quite cooperate. "You should see the other guy." The weeks that followed were a strange dream of healing and quiet revolution. The political fallout from the Battle of the Conflux was swift and decisive. Drayden Holt, extradited to the Saffron Ring, had sung like a canary, detailing every aspect of his deal with Harrowketh in a failed attempt at a plea bargain. His testimony, combined with the data Avery had stolen from Cinderfall, was enough. Helios Crown was dismantled by interstellar treaty, its assets seized, its dark energy research classified at the highest levels. Harrowketh, however, had vanished. He had slipped away in the chaos following his final threat, a ghost in a world that no longer wanted him. The Covenant of Purity officially disbanded, its members scrambling to distance themselves from the disgraced regent. But the seeds of their purest ideology remained, a dormant poison beneath the surface of a healing world. Under Syra's guidance, Orelon began to rebuild, not just its temple, but its society. The old High Council was dissolved, replaced by a new governing body, the Harmonic Council, comprised of scientists, artists, and spiritual leaders. Their first act was to establish a joint scientific and mystical guardianship over the newly restored conflux, ensuring its power could never again be used as a political weapon. Their second act was to create a new, permanent seat on the Council, the Earth Liaison. They offered the position to Avery. He was in a sunlit convalescence chamber, overlooking the vast, swirling sea of silver mist that served as Orelon's ocean. When Sarah presented him with the formal offer, he laughed, a rusty, painful sound that made his ribs ache and his arm hum a discordant chord. "Me, a diplomat, Commander. My primary diplomatic tool tends to be breaking things." "Sometimes, that is precisely what is required," Sarah replied, her tone serious, but with a ghost of a smile playing on her lips. "You broke our stagnation. You broke Harrow's power. You are a part of our song now, Avery. The people see you not as an outsider, but as the anchor who held us steady in the storm. They trust you." "It is a temporary appointment," she added quickly, seeing the conflict in his eyes, "until a formal ambassador can be assigned, but the seat is yours, for as long as you wish to hold it." He did not give her an answer immediately. The idea of being a politician was absurd. He was a creature of shadows and firewalls, not council chambers and treaties. But the thought of leaving Orelon, of leaving her and Nia, left a hollow ache in his chest that had nothing to do with his injuries. He moved into a small, elegant apartment suspended from one of the city's high spires, a glass-walled pod that hung in the luminous mist, offering a view that felt like living inside a cloud. It was a strange and beautiful new life. Mornings were filled with the sound of Nia practicing her singing. Her voice, now perfectly in tune, would weave in and out of the planet's great resonance, a joyful, improvisational melody that was the purest sound of healing he had ever heard. Evenings were often filled with Syra's determined and hilariously failed attempts at Terran cooking. She had become obsessed with the concept of pizza, a food so alien to the Orinth palate that she approached it with the grim determination of a military campaign. Her first attempt, using a zero-gravity culinary synthesizer she had ordered from the Saffron Ring, resulted in a floating, semi-sentient blob of cheese and nutrient paste that hummed with a vaguely threatening energy and had to be jettisoned from the balcony. "It is," Musical, Nia had offered, with the profound solemnity only a child could muster. Avery, clutching his aching side from laughing too hard, had agreed. It is definitely something. In these quiet moments, the storm of the past few weeks felt a lifetime away. He would watch Sarah, her brow furrowed in concentration as she tried to decipher a recipe for garlic bread, and he would feel a sense of peace that was so profound, so alien. It was almost frightening. He was happy. It was a simple, terrifying fact. But the ghosts would not stay buried. In the quiet hours of the Orelon night, when the mists glowed with the light of the twin moons, the name would surface in his mind. Nora. Holt's confession had confirmed it. There was a third party, an anonymous sponsor pulling the strings of both Holt and Harrow, a master manipulator who had set the entire board. It was she who had orchestrated the attack. It was she who had almost gotten Nia killed. It was she who had used the same mercenaries that had murdered his sister. He wanted her. The desire for vengeance was a cold, hard knot in his gut, a dissonant chord in the otherwise peaceful symphony of his new life. He would find himself flexing his healing hand, the low hum of the resonator, a somber counterpoint to his dark thoughts. He had a family to protect now. He understood that blind revenge, the kind he had craved for a decade, was a fire that would consume everything he now held dear. But justice. Justice was different. His sister's memory demanded it. Sarah saw the shadow in his eyes. She found him one evening, standing on the balcony, staring into the silver mist, his right hand clenching and unclenching, playing a low, mournful tune on his arm. "This ghost," she said softly, coming to stand beside him. "She is not just in your past. Is she? She is in our home. I can feel her in your silence." He did not deny it. "Her name is Nora Vale. She was my mentor, my commanding officer. She taught me everything I know about strategy, infiltration, and betrayal. She is the architect of all of this, and she is the one who sent my sister to her death." The words hung in the misty air between them, raw and heavy. Sarah was silent for a long time. She looked at his face, at the pain and rage warring there. She looked at his arm, the beautiful, singing scar he now carried. She understood that this part of him, the soldier, the vengeful brother, could not be healed by quiet nights and badly cooked pizza. It was a wound that had to be cleansed with truth. "Then you must hunt her," she said, her voice clear and strong. He turned to look at her, surprised. "You must find this woman and bring her to justice." She took a step closer, her luminous purple eyes locking onto his. She placed a hand on his chest, her touch gentle but firm, a silent reminder of her battlefield vow. "But you will do it on one condition," she said. "You hunt her, but you do not lose us. You do not lose yourself. You are not the butcher they tried to name you. Avery, you are a builder, a protector. Do not let her turn you back into the weapon she created." Her gaze was fierce, a commander's ultimatum and a lover's plea entwined. "Promise me." He looked at her, at the incredible strength and love she was offering him. A love that did not ask him to be less than what he was, but demanded that he be more. He covered her hand with his own, the metal and crystal of his brace cool against her skin. "I promise," he said. A few days later, Nia, who had been listening to their conversations with the unnerving attention of a clever child, made a solemn declaration over a breakfast of shimmering fruit and crystal-clear water. "When I grow up," she announced, her voice full of purpose, "I am going to be the rhythm keeper. It will be my job to keep the heartbeat for the whole family, so it never gets lost." Sarah smiled, a soft, beautiful expression that made Avery's own heart ache. Avery, however, managed a genuine, pain-free smirk. "Tough luck, kid," he said, ruffling her silvery hair. "That job's already taken. Your mother has it on lockdown." Nia giggled, and for a perfect, sun-drenched moment. The ghosts felt a million light-years away. It was a piece he knew was fragile, a quiet interlude before the final act. He just had not expected the curtain to rise so soon. That evening, a message arrived. It did not come through the standard Orinth comms, or even Rafe's secure backchannels. It appeared as a ghost file on his personal data slate, a file that bypassed all of his formidable firewalls as if they were not even there. It was a single, text-only file, written in a cipher so old and obscure it predated his time in Black Ops. It was the code Nora had taught him, their private, unbreakable language. The message was brief, a cold shard of ice in the warmth of his new life. The Empyrean, saffron ring, the table where it began, 48 hours. Beneath the text was a single, elegant symbol, a stylized sigil that he had not seen in over 10 years. It was the personal crest of his former strategic advisor. An invitation from a ghost, the final piece of his past, reaching out from the darkness, demanding to be faced. The journey back to the saffron ring was a quiet, solemn passage through the stars. Sarah had not tried to stop him. She had held him, a long and silent embrace that said everything that words could not. She had placed a small, crystalline data chip in his hand. "Rafe is monitoring everything," she had said. "The moment you are in danger, we are coming. I do not care about interstellar law. I will burn that station to the ground to get to you." He had promised her he would be careful, a promise that felt thin and inadequate against the gravity of what he was about to do. The Empyrean was exactly as he remembered. A perfect circle of impossible engineering and quiet, expensive chatter. The gaping hole in the wall had been seamlessly repaired, the scorched decor replaced. To the casual observer, the night of the attack had never happened. But for Avery, the place was a graveyard, haunted by the ghosts of the life he had lost and the life he had almost failed to find. He walked to the same table, the one that offered the most breathtaking view of the blue and white marble of Earth. The magnetic chair hummed as it adjusted to his weight. And sitting in the other chair, a glass of water untouched before her, was a woman he had not seen in 10 years. Nora Vale looked exactly the same. Her hair was still a severe, steel-gray bob. Her face was still a mask of calm, intelligent lines, unaged by time or conscience. She wore a simple, elegant black suit, her posture as precise and confident as he remembered from 100 mission briefings. She was the ghost at the feast, the architect of his ruin, and she looked as if she were merely waiting for a business lunch to begin. "You are late, Avery," she said. Her voice the same calm, analytical tone that had once guided him through firefights and death traps. There was no surprise, no malice, just a simple statement of fact. "The traffic from Orlon was murder," he replied, his voice a low, dangerous growl. He sat down, his body a coiled spring of tension. The low, melodic hum of the resonator on his arm was the only outward sign of the storm raging inside him. "A beautiful world," Nora commented, glancing out at the planet below, fragile. Its entire culture is built on a single, exploitable frequency. It needed a catalyst to force it to evolve. You were that catalyst. "You set it all up," he stated. "Not a question. Holt, Harrow, the attack, the mercenaries." "Of course," she said, as if discussing a minor logistical problem. Harrow was a useful fanatic. Holt was a greedy fool. The Black Serpents are a reliable, if unsubtle, tool. I simply created a crisis with a very specific, engineered solution. She looked at him, her eyes as cold and gray as a winter sky. And the solution was you. The rage in his chest was a physical thing, a white-hot pressure building behind his ribs. He thought of his sister, Sarah, of her bright, laughing eyes. "Cygnus X1," he bit out. "That was you too. You sold us out." Nora took a sip of water. I did not sell you out. Avery. I sacrificed a piece to win the game. For years, a faction within our own interstellar command had been selling human technology and intelligence to hostile alien powers. They were too deeply embedded to root out conventionally. I needed to expose them, to get a list of names. The Cygnus mission was the bait. I designed it to fail, spectacularly and tragically. I leaked the details of your route to the traders, knowing they would sell it to the Black Serpents. Your team's death, the loss of the intel. It was all a carefully calibrated tragedy designed to flush them out. And it worked, in the chaos that followed. I got my list. We spent the next 10 years quietly dismantling their network from the inside. Avery stared at her, the blood roaring in his ears. The cold, dispassionate logic of it was more monstrous than any simple act of greed or hatred. She had murdered his team, his family, as a strategic calculation. "My sister," he whispered, the name a shard of glass in his throat. "She was not on your team. She was a civilian, a student." "An acceptable tactical loss," Nora said. And there was not a flicker of remorse in her eyes. The traders needed to be certain the leak was genuine. They needed to tie up any loose ends, anyone connected to you. Her death added a layer of tragic authenticity to the event. It made your subsequent disappearance and disillusionment all the more believable. It was necessary. Avery. That was it. The final, sterile, inhuman word that severed the last thread of the man he had once been. He wanted to kill her. The urge was a physical, overwhelming wave, a red tide that flooded his senses. He could see it, feel it. The lunge across the table, the snap of her neck, the final, satisfying silence. His hand twitched, his muscles tensing. The resonator on his arm hummed a high, sharp note of agitation. And then he saw Nia's face. He saw her smile, heard her declare that she would be the rhythm keeper for their family. He saw Sarah, her hand on his chest, her voice a battlefield promise. "You are not the butcher they tried to name you. You are a builder." He took a slow, ragged breath, the air burning his lungs. He forced the red tide to recede. He was not her weapon anymore. He would not let her turn him into a killer. He would not let his sister's memory be honored with another death. He would not let tragedy define him. That was a human strength she could never comprehend. He would choose justice, not vengeance. "You are right about one thing. Nora," he said, his voice shaking with the effort of his control. "It was all a game, but you forgot to tell me about the most important piece on the board." Nora allowed herself a small, thin smile, the first hint of emotion he had seen. It was a smile of pure, intellectual triumph. "Ah, yes. The final variable. The one that ensured you would be the solution. You see, the alliance between Earth and Orelon was always the endgame. We needed their resources, their unique understanding of resonance for our next leap in space travel. They needed our pragmatism, our grit, to survive in a hostile galaxy. But treaties are just paper. I needed a bond that was deeper, something biological, irrevocable." She leaned forward slightly. "Years ago, during the siege of Proxima B, you were injured while rescuing a group of colonists. A field medic took a sample of your blood, your DNA, for a standard medical workup. I flagged that sample. I kept it. The Orinth, for all their mysticism, are masters of genetics. I provided the sample, anonymously, to one of their more ambitious fertility clinics, a clinic Syra Thal was known to be consulting. I knew her genetic profile was remarkably compatible. I designed a daughter for her, Avery, a perfect, stable, biological bridge between our two species." The world tilted, the stars outside the window seeming to spin into a dizzying vortex. The pieces clicked into place with a final, horrifying snap. Nia, her silver hair, her purple eyes, and the way she had looked at him, clung to him, whispered that he smelled like home. She knew who to find that night in this restaurant, Nora said, her voice laced with the quiet pride of a master craftsman admiring her work. She was not just lost, Avery. She was following a genetic imperative I helped encode. She was looking for her father. He said nothing. There were no words for the scale of this violation, this cosmic manipulation. He had not just been a pawn. He had been the breeding stock. He slowly, deliberately, placed the small, crystalline data chip Sarah had given him on the table. He pressed a single, almost invisible stud on its side. It was now recording everything, broadcasting it on a secure, encrypted frequency to Rafe, to Sarah, and to every interstellar law enforcement agency in the sector. "You think you have won," he said, his voice eerily calm. "You think you built this." "I did," Nora stated, her confidence absolute. "Look at the results. A corrupt corporation is dismantled. A fanatical xenophobe is deposed. A new, powerful alliance is forged. And you, Avery, you have a family. You have a purpose again. I gave you the ending you deserved." "You gave me nothing," he shot back, his voice finally cracking with a cold, righteous fury. "You built the cage, Nora, but you did not build what happened inside it. The choices we made, they were ours. I chose to shield that little girl, not because of a genetic imperative, but because it was the right thing to do. Sarah chose to stand by me, not because of a political calculation, but because she saw the man I was, not the weapon you made. Our love, our family. It was not built by your design. It was forged in our own fire. We earned it. We chose it. That is the difference between us. You see people as pieces to be moved. We see them as people to be loved." He stood up. "This is over." Nora's smile finally faded, replaced by a flicker of genuine confusion. "What are you doing?" "Choosing justice," he said. And then the security forces of the Saffron Ring swarmed the restaurant, their weapons raised. Nora Vale did not resist. She stood with a quiet dignity as they placed her in restraints, her cold, analytical eyes fixed on Avery. She had made only one miscalculation. She had forgotten to account for the stubborn, illogical, and utterly indomitable power of the human heart. The aftermath was a quiet, steady process of healing and rebuilding. The trial of Nora Vale was the biggest legal event in a century, her recorded confession sending shockwaves through the human command structure. The network she had exposed was finally, completely, eradicated. Harrow Keth was declared a wanted fugitive, a sad, angry ghost haunting the edges of known space. And Earth and Orelon, their alliance now cemented by a shared crisis and a shared victory, signed the Harmonic Treaty, a new pact of mutual cooperation and defense. Avery told Sarah everything. He sat with her on the balcony of their apartment, the silver mists swirling below, and he told her about the stolen DNA. He watched her face, terrified of what he might see there. She listened, her expression unreadable. When he was finished, she was silent for a long time. Then she stood up, walked into Nia's room, and came back, leading their daughter by the hand. She knelt before the little girl. "Nia," she said, her voice soft but clear. "Your father is the man who chose to be here. He is the man whose heart we sang to. Biology does not make a family. Love does." Nia looked from her mother to Avery. She walked to him and placed her small hand on his chest, right where her mother's had been during the rite. "I already knew," she said, with the simple, profound wisdom of a child who has seen the universe in a new way. "Your heartbeat matches mine. We are in tune." They were married in the Grand Plaza of Ethel, beneath the restored, purplish-pink dome of the harmonic conflux. It was a small, quiet ceremony, attended by friends and the new members of the Harmonic Council. Their wedding rings were not made of gold or platinum. Sarah had taken 2 of the thin, crystalline fibers from Avery's therapeutic resonator, which he no longer needed, and had them woven into 2 simple, shimmering bands. A piece of his healing, a symbol of their song, now worn by them both. The Orinth Arbiter was in the middle of a long, melodic speech about cosmic harmony and the convergence of souls, when Nia, who was the official ring-bearer, suddenly held up her hand. "Wait!" she shouted, her small voice echoing in the vast plaza. The Arbiter stopped, looking flustered. The crowd murmured. Nia puffed out her chest, full of self-importance. "I just want to say," she declared, "that if anyone here objects to this, they have to have a sing-off with me, and I am very good now." A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. Avery looked at Sarah, who was trying and failing to hide a smile. He grinned, a real, unrestrained smile that reached his eyes. As if on cue, a hidden choir of Orinth singers, a surprise Sarah had arranged, swelled into a triumphant, joyful anthem. The purplish-pink light of the conflux pulsed in time with the music, bathing them all in the warm, vibrant color of a new dawn. It was a perfect, happy ending, or it was a perfect, happy new beginning. Because far out at the edge of the system, on the dark side of a forgotten moon, a faint, encrypted signal pulsed to life. It was a single, angry word, a promise of a story yet to come. "Harrow!"